Hi, for this video I'm going to show you how to do the interlocking filet crochet technique. We are going to be working on this snowflake coaster. I will be covering briefly how to do the setup for this coaster and going more in depth on how to do the diagonals. So if you'd like to follow along, the coaster pattern is a free pattern on my website and the link to the pattern is in the description.
This is the coaster that I'm going to show you how to make. This one is done with the green as the contrasting color and the white as the background or main color, but you can also switch it around and get a completely different look by doing the green as the background and the white as the contrasting color. So these coasters were done with the comfy fingering weight yarn and a size 2.2 millimeter crochet hook, but for demonstration I am going to use this worsted weight Red Heart Soft and a 5 millimeter crochet hook. Okay, so we're going to start out doing the foundation and the first row. It starts out with a chain of 30, which I have right here already. I already did my 30 chain. We're going to double crochet in the 6th chain from the hook. That's my first window. Then I'm going to chain 1, skip a chain, and double crochet in the next chain 12 times. Chain 1, skip a chain, and double crochet. So we'll continue across the row and I'll meet you at the end of the row. Okay, I've gotten to the end of the row. I have 13 windows. And then always at the end of the row, you're going to chain 4. And for the main color, this counts as the outside stitch for the next row plus a chain 1. So we're gonna add a stitch marker. Okay, for the contrasting color, we're gonna start with 28 chain. So I have already made my 28 chain. And then we need to mark the 6th chain from the hook. And to set it up, we're going to line it up so that that 6th chain is lining up over the 2nd window. And then you're going to lay it across, and then the last chain will end up over the last window. So as you compare it to the graph, the way I have it numbered here, I have the foundation chain. Even though I have it marked as a foundation, if you have any other graph, these first 2 lines are always the foundation chain. So we have the 2 foundation chains, and then the white is this first main color. And now we're going to do the first contrasting color. So you can see it starts out with a front stitch. It's going to be back across the row, and then it's going to end with a front stitch. So what I'm going to do is, beginning with the marked chain in the 2nd window, we're going to do 11 back stitches. So the first one will be in the 2nd window. So I want to have that lined up with the 2nd window. I'm going to pull the top of that chain to the back. and then do my double crochet. So as you are working along, it's really important to understand the difference between back and front and wrong side and right side. So if you're looking at the finished piece, the design side is always the right side and the hidden side is always the wrong side. As you're working on the rows, no matter which side is facing you, the front is always the side facing towards you, and the back is always the side facing away from you. So I have one back stitch, so I need to do 10 more. So I need to skip a chain and then grab the top of the next chain and pull it through the window to the back and do my double crochet. And then my chain one, because we need a chain one between each mesh stitch. So I'm going to skip the next chain and pull the next chain through that window to the back. Skip that chain and then pull the next one through the window to the back. Okay, I'll meet you at the end of the row. Okay, I've done my 11 back stitches. You can see them all in the back. And now I need to do my inside front stitch. And since this chain is already in the front, I don't have to pull it through the window. I can just do the double crochet in that last chain. Then I'm going to do my chain 4. And for the contrasting color, this counts as the inside front or back stitch and the chain 1. So just add a stitch marker. And so you always work 2 rows in one direction, a main color and a contrasting color row, and then you turn the work and work 2 rows in the opposite direction, one main color and one contrasting color row. Now we're ready to work the wrong side rows. So the first thing that's very important is you want to make sure that your contrasting color is moved to the correct side of the work. So I need to put my contrasting color towards the back of the work. So that's the side facing away from me. And then we'd have an outside stitch, 12 back stitches, and an outside stitch. Okay, so my contrasting color is to the back facing away, and I'm going to start with my main color. So my chain 4 counts as my outside stitch plus the chain 1, and then I'm going to do 12 back stitches. So we need to make sure that we are working in the back. So I'm going to, since it's already in the back, we don't have to pull it through a window. We can just go across the row and do our double crochet. So I'm working my double crochet in the same color mesh stitch below. So I'm going to chain 1 and then work in the next one. Chain 1, skip that chain, and then double crochet in the next. So all our mesh stitches are lining up and we're making new windows. So I will meet you at the end of the row. Okay, I have my 12 back stitches. I'm going to do my last chain 1 there and then my outside stitch. So I'm going to skip that next chain and then double crochet in the next one and chain 4. Okay, now I'm ready for my contrasting row. We're going to have an inside back and then a front stitch. Okay, so my turning chain 4 is the inside back plus a chain 1. So make sure my windows line up. That inside back stitch lines up in this first window, and my front stitch goes over this window. And my chain 1. So you might want to have a marker to check off where you are. So my next stitch is a diagonal, and the diagonals are always combined with the mesh stitch, and they always count as just one mesh stitch. And the mesh stitch of the group is the working stitch. So in this case, if I'm doing the front stitch, the diagonal to the right is to the right of that stitch. So let me show you. So let me do my chain 1. Okay, so the working stitch is this is the mesh stitch that you're going to be working in. So that counts as the working stitch. So in order to work to the right of that, you're going to make the diagonal into this stitch. And diagonals are always done on the right side of the work. So since right now we are working on the wrong side, we want to pick up the loop in the back to make it end up on the right side. So diagonals are done with the treble, so I'm going to start with 2 loops, 2 yarn overs. I'm going to pick up the top of the stitch that I'm working into and pull it through to the right side. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over and pull through 2 twice. So I'm going to leave the last loop on the hook so that I can do the second part of the stitch, which is the front. So yarn over for a double crochet. I'm going to pick up the top of that mesh stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then go through 2. And I have the last stitch of both of those pieces of my diagonal. So yarn over and pull through all, and that finishes that mesh stitch. And then my chain 1. Okay, now I have 2 back stitches. So now I'm working in this window. So I'm going to pull that stitch to the back and do my back stitch, which is a double crochet, chain 1, and then do another back stitch. Pull the top of that stitch to the back and chain 1. Okay, now I have a front combined with a diagonal left. Okay, so yarn over for a double crochet. I'm going to start my front stitch in this one and leave the last loop on the hook, and diagonal left is going to go into the next, from the working stitch to the left. So yarn over twice. I want to pick that up on the right side, so I want to pull that through. Leave the last loop on the hook, and then yarn over and pull them all together. So that's my front diagonal left. Next we have a front stitch. So there always needs to be a mesh stitch in every mesh stitch. So I still need to do a mesh stitch in this one, even though I did a diagonal in 2. Diagonals are always extra. So I'm going to do my front stitch here in my chain 1. Now I'm going to do another diagonal right combined with the front. Okay, so same like before, this is the working stitch that I'll be working into. So diagonal right always goes, it always ends up being into the last mesh stitch you worked in because it's to the right of the working stitch. So yarn over twice. I want the diagonal on the right side, so I need to pull it through the window. And then my front, so my yarn over for my double crochet, do this stitch. Oops. I got the last loop of each stitch on the hook, and so yarn over and combine the stitch to complete that mesh stitch. Okay, now I have 2 back stitches. So always try to remember to do your chain 1 between mesh stitches. So I'm going to pull this stitch to the back, chain 1, and pull this stitch to the back, and chain 1. I have 1 more front combined with a diagonal left, and then a front stitch. So I'm going to do my double crochet for the front, leave the last loop on the hook, and then 2 yarn overs to do the diagonal, so pull that to the right side, and complete the stitch. Chain 1, and then my front stitch, and chain 1. And then I want to end with an inside back. So I want to pull that through the window to the back. You want to skip 1 chain and single crochet in the next. The first chain is a little hard to see because it's behind what you're working on. And then chain 4. So you can see how the design is taking shape when we turn it back to the right side. Okay, now we're working on the right side of the work again. We're going to start with the main color, but we want to make sure that our contrasting color is facing towards the front, so we want to make sure that's to the front of the work. We're going to do our outside stitch, which was our turning chain. We're going to start out with 2 front stitches. Okay, so this is my outside stitch, and then I'm going to do the front stitch in the next one there. And my chain 1. Now when you're working around the diagonals, you have to be careful. You want to make sure the diagonal stays in front. When from the right side of the work, it's always going to be in front. So if you pull the diagonal over towards the mesh stitch that it's attached to, you can get to the top of that stitch that you need to work into. So there's 2 front stitches. I'm going to do a back and then 6 front stitches. So the back stitch, you want to make sure your windows are lined up. The back stitch is going to be here. We want to pull that to the back and do our double crochet. And then I'm going to do 6 front stitches. So we'll pull it to the front. And pull it to the front. Now we have another diagonal to work around, so we want to pull that over towards the mesh stitch it's attached to, so that's that way, over this direction. So got that front one. The next one is going to lean the other way, so we need to pull that over that way. And then 2 more, so I'll have 6. one more back stitch and 2 front stitches. Okay, so I'm going to pull that through that window to the back, and then up front I need to pull that diagonal over to get to the top of that stitch. And one last front stitch. And then I'm going to finish with my out stitch, so my chain 1, and that's got to be on the outside. Okay, so now we need to work on the right side with the contrasting color. So we're going to start with the inside front and then do 1 back stitch. Okay, so the turning chain counts as my inside front plus chain 1. So I'm gonna work in this next mesh stitch and in the back, so do the double crochet and chain 1. And you can see you want to make sure your windows are lined up all the time. So the contrasting color is always lining up between the windows of the main color. So I have my back stitch. Now I need to do 9 front stitches. I have my chain 1. So we want to pull the top of that stitch towards the front. And I'll meet you at the end of the row. Okay, I have my 9 front stitches. Now I need to finish with 1 more back stitch and then the inside front. So my chain 1, want to make sure that's in the back, so pull that forward. And then chain 1 and then my inside front. So make sure it's coming through that window. We're going to skip that chain that's behind there and then double crochet in that next chain. And then chain 4 for the end of the row. Okay, now we finished both colors for the right side. We're going to flip it over and do the wrong side rows. Okay, now we're ready to do the wrong side rows. We're going to start off with the contrasting color. We want to make sure that is facing towards the back of the work. And then we're going to start out with the outside stitch and a back stitch. Okay, so my contrasting color is towards the back. And this is my outside stitch plus my chain 1. And then I'm going to do a back stitch. So you want to make sure that is going forward so you can get to that stitch in the back, which is right here. So there's my back stitch. And chain 1. And then I'm going to do 2 front stitches. So in that next window, I want to make sure that's to the front. And then I have 6 back stitches. So always make sure your windows are lining up. So I want to pull this stitch through to the back. have 6 back stitches. So I've done these. I'm going to do 2 more front stitches and a back stitch and then an outside stitch. So my chain 1, pull that to the front. So there's my 2 front stitches, then a back stitch. I'm going to make sure we're pulling the right one through the window there. And an outside stitch. Okay, so we did those. Okay, now we're ready for the contrasting color. So we have our inside back and then 3 front stitches. So this is my inside back plus the chain 1. I'm going to do 3 front stitches. This one's already in front, so I can just pick up that top, do my double crochet. Make sure my windows are lined up correctly. So we need to pull the top of that stitch through to the front. Okay, now we're going to do a diagonal right plus a back stitch. Okay, so we are working on the wrong side of the work, so we want to make sure the diagonal ends up on the right side, so you yarn over twice. This is my working stitch, so to the right is going to be back in this same stitch we just worked into. So pull the top of that to the back, to the right side. And then we're going to do a back stitch in this one. So yarn over, I'm going to pull the top of that stitch to the back, yarn over and pull one on, and then through 2 loops. And then we're going to complete the stitch. Okay, then we have a front stitch. So do my chain 1. We're going to do the front stitch here in that next mesh stitch. Okay, and this one is going to make like a upside down V. So this is a diagonal right, a back stitch, and a diagonal left, all 3 connected. Okay, so this is where my working mesh stitch is going to go. So I'm going to yarn over twice. My diagonal right is going to go here. So I want to pull that through to the right side, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then go through 2 loops twice. The next part of that is a back stitch, so yarn over, I'm going to pull the top of that through the back, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then go through 2 loops. So those are the first 2 parts. And then we have to do the diagonal left, so yarn over twice, pull the top of that next stitch to the right side, then yarn over and pull up a loop, and then go through 2 loops twice. Now I have all 3 parts on the hook, and I can yarn over and finish the stitch. So chain 1. Now I'm going to do a front stitch. And we haven't done a mesh stitch in this one yet, so we're going to work on that. Do that one, the front stitch, and chain 1. Because remember, there always has to be a mesh stitch in every mesh stitch. Okay, and then my next one is a back plus a diagonal left. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this next stitch to the back and do my back stitch. Oops, that one is a back and a diagonal left. Okay, so do my back. Just do the first part. So that's the part of my back, and then I'm going to yarn over twice for the diagonal. So that's going to go in this next stitch. Pull it to the right side. And then yarn over and complete the stitch. And then I'm going to finish with three front stitches and then an inside back. So we need to do a front stitch in that one. Chain one, and then my inside back. So that's got to go through the window to the back. And there's the chain one that it's kind of behind that stitch, but you're going to skip that and then double crochet in the next. And then chain 4. And then we'll turn the work over. So you can see the design starting to take shape here. Okay, now we're going to be working on the right side of the work. We want to make sure that the contrasting color is facing towards the front. And then we are going to be working with the main color. So we have our outside stitch, which is the chain, and then we're going to start with 1 front stitch and 3 back stitches. Okay, so this is our outside stitch. Then the front stitch goes in that mesh stitch. Chain 1, and then we're going to do 3 back stitches. So in the next window here, we're going to pull that to the back and do our double crochet. Oops. And you'll have to flip this to the front so you can see that next stitch there. So I have 3 to the back. Now I'm going to do 4 front stitches. So in this next mesh stitch where there's 1, and this one we're working around a diagonal, we got to pull that over to this mesh, towards its mesh stitch, so you can get to that stitch. And then we're going to pull it back to that side. And then I have 3 back stitches and a front stitch, and then my outside stitch. So could pull that to the front so we could get to the back there. There's 1. We'll pull that stitch to the back through the window. And then pull that one through the window to do the back stitch. And then my front stitch. And then the outside stitch. And there's my chain 4 at the end. Okay, now we're ready for the contrasting color. So we're gonna have our inside front and then 4 back stitches. Okay, so I have my inside front. It's sitting in this window, and then I'm going to do 4 back stitches. So in the next window, you can kind of see the top of the stitch there. I'm going to pull that towards the back. In some cases, the stitches are kind of hiding to work into. Okay, this is the top of my next stitch. I'm going to pull that to the back. And pull that one to the back through the next window. Okay, there's my 4 back stitches. Now I'm going to do a diagonal right with the back stitch. So here's my chain 1. So this is my working stitch, so the right is the stitch you just finished working into. So right now we're working on the right side, and diagonals go on the right side, so we want to make sure that this is pulled towards the front. So pick up your loop and then go through 2 loops twice. And then the next part of that stitches to the back. So we're going to do our yarn over for our double crochet and then pick up our loop and go through 2 and then finish the stitch. Okay, the next one is a diagonal right with a front and a diagonal left. So my chain 1, my yarn over twice for my diagonal, and we're going to pull that stitch to the front. Okay, the next one is a front stitch, so my yarn over for my front stitch and pull that to the front. And then my diagonal left goes here, so yarn over twice for the diagonal. Pull it to the front, to the right side. I have all 3 parts of the stitch on my hook, and then yarn over and complete the stitch and chain 1. Then I have a back combined with the diagonal left. So we haven't done our mesh stitch here yet, so we're going to pull that stitch to the back and do the back, and then yarn over twice for the left, and that's on the right side, so that needs to stay in front here. And then complete the stitch and my chain 1. Then I'm going to finish off with 4 back stitches in the inside front. Okay, so we haven't worked a mesh stitch here yet, so we're pulling this to the back. And then my inside front. Okay, now we're ready to go to the wrong side rows. Okay, now we're ready for the wrong side rows. We want to make sure to move the contrasting color to the back And then we're going to start out with an outside stitch, 2 back stitches, and a front stitch. So my contrasting color is to the back. This is my outside stitch plus the chain 1. You have 2 back stitches. Make sure your windows are lined up correctly. This is on the outside. So my back stitch is right there. Then a front stitch. So pull it towards the front. And then I have six back stitches. Okay, this one is behind a diagonal. When you're on the wrong side, you have to be really careful to make sure that the diagonals are moved over. So we're going to pull it towards its attached mesh stitch so we can get to the top of that stitch. And when you're working on the wrong side, it's a good idea to check to make sure the diagonals are ending up in the correct window. Then I'm going to end with a front and 2 back and then my outside stitch. That's my front, then my back. There's 1. And my outside. Okay, now we're ready to do the contrasting color. So I'm going to have my inside back, and then I'm going to start out with the front combined with the diagonal left. So here is my inside back. Make sure my windows are lined up. So my first one is a front. So we're going to start in the front here. And then diagonal left. So yarn over twice. And my chain 1. Then I have 2 front stitches. And then 2 diagonal right front stitches. Okay, so we're working on the wrong side again, so the diagonal has to go to the back, to the wrong side, or to the right side, I'm sorry. And that's combined with the front. Okay, we have to do that twice, so yarn over twice. front stitch and my chain 1. Next, this one's going to be 3 combined, a diagonal right, a back, and a diagonal left. So there is the first part, the diagonal right. And then it's a back stitch, so we're going to pull that stitch to the back. And then a diagonal right, so pulling that to the right side. And then yarn over to complete it. Then we're going to do a front with a diagonal left twice. And then we're doing 2 front stitches. And then we're going to end with the diagonal right front and then the inside back. And my inside back. Okay, then we'll turn it back over to the right side. So we're just about halfway through the design. Okay, now we're ready to work on the right side again. We want to make sure and move the contrasting color so it's towards the front of the work. Then we have an outside stitch and start out with 2 front stitches. So my contrasting color is to the front. This is my outside stitch plus the chain 1. I'm going to do 2 front stitches. Okay, we want to make sure that that diagonal is moved over so we can get to that one. Then we have 8 back stitches. So we're going to pull those to the back. Okay, there's my 8 back stitches. And then I'm going to do front 2 and then an outside stitch. So make sure that window is pulled over there to towards its mesh stitch. for the diagonals pulled towards its mesh stitch. There's my front 2 and my outside stitch. Okay, for the contrasting color, we are going to start with, we have our inside front and then a back stitch. Okay, this is my inside front, so I'm going to do my back stitch in that next mesh stitch. And I'm going to do a diagonal right combined with the back. So now we're on the right side, so these are going to be in the front. And then my combined with its back stitch. Now I'm going to do 3 back combined with the diagonal left. So I'll pull that to the back, and then my diagonal, and my chain 1. So another back diagonal left, and then the diagonal left on the right side. And my last one, back, and the diagonal left. Now I'm going to do a front. And that's in that same stitch because we haven't done the mesh stitch there yet. And then 3 diagonal right combined with the back. So my diagonal right on the right side and back. My chain 1 is another diagonal right. Combined with the back. And my third one. So then I need one more back combined with the diagonal left, and then a back one and my inside front. So my back diagonal left, there's the back, and 2 yarn overs for my diagonal. That's my back diagonal left, and then a back one, and my inside front. Okay, that's the finish of the right side, so we're ready to flip it over and do the wrong side next. Okay, for the wrong side, we want to make sure and move our contrasting color to the back. And we have our outside stitch, and then we're starting with 2 back stitches. So my contrasting color is to the back. here's my outside stitch plus the chain 1, and I'm going to do 2 back stitches. On top of that mesh stitch. And you want to make sure that diagonal is moved over there so you can get to this stitch. Then I'm going to do a front stitch and then 6 back stitches. There's the front. Make sure that diagonal is moved over. And always pull the diagonal toward its mesh stitch to work around it. It's always a good idea to check and make sure your diagonals are ending correct, especially when you're working on the wrong side. Okay, so then I'm going to end with the front and then 2 back stitches and my outside stitch. So there's my front. And back. Okay, for the contrasting color, we're going to have the inside back and start with 3 front stitches. Okay, this is my inside back, so we're going to do 3 front stitches. I'm going to do 2 front combined with a diagonal left. So there's the front, and then the diagonal needs to go to the right side. And another one. Then I'm going to do 1 back stitch. So we haven't done a mesh stitch in this one yet. And then 2 diagonal right combined with the front stitch. And then we'll finish off with 3 front stitches and an inside back. Okay, and my inside back. Okay, now we're ready for the right side again. Okay, now we're ready for our right side rows. We want to make sure our contrasting color is to the front. We're going to start out, we have our outside stitch, then start out with 1 front, 3 back, 4 front, 3 back, and 1 front, and then our outside stitch. So my contrasting color is to the front. I'm going to do my front stitch. Three back stitches. Four front stitches. We want to make sure that diagonal is pushed over to its mesh stitch, so you can get to that stitch to work into. Okay, then 3 back. Front and an outside stitch. Okay, now for my contrasting color, we have our inside front, and then start with 2 back stitches. Okay, there's my inside front. There's 1 back stitch. And 2 back stitches. Now I have a back combined with the diagonal left. So back, leave that last loop on the hook, and then the diagonal left goes on the right side, which is what we're working on, so it's on the front here. Then I have a front and then another back combined with the diagonal left. So there's my front. And my back combined with the diagonal left. Then I have another front. And then I have a diagonal right combined with the back. That's still going in that same stitch because that's the right of the front stitch that we're going to do. Oops, that was supposed to be a back stitch. So we'll go in the back. Okay, another front and then a diagonal right combined with the back stitch. Okay, there's my front. And then diagonal right combined with the back. And then I'm going to end with 2 back stitches in my inside front. Two back stitches and inside front. Okay, well that gets you started on working on this coaster. You always want to make sure that the diagonals are showing on the front side when you're working around mesh stitches, and when you need to access the stitch, you want to make sure that the diagonal is pushed towards the mesh stitch that it's attached to. So I will meet you at the end of row 13 and then I'll show you the border. Okay, I'm at the end of row 13. I did my 12 back stitches and my outside stitch, and for this row we do not chain 4 at the end, so I'm ready for my border. So we're going to start out by working along the side. I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to single crochet around that double crochet we just finished, just like you're working in a chain space. Then chain 2, and then you're going to single crochet in the center of the single crochet you just made, so it's going through the middle of it like that to make a picot. Okay, and then you're just going to keep working in the spaces along the side. So I'm going to single crochet, chain 2, and then single crochet in the center. Chain 2, and then single crochet in the center. So I'm going to keep doing that until I get to the corner. Okay, I'm at the corner. So in this space here, I'm going to do 3 of the single crochets with the picot. So there's 1, 2, and then this is my 3rd. Okay, now I'm going to go around the bottom and single crochet in each of the chain spaces. So we're doing just like I did on the first side, but you're going into chain spaces instead of around a stitch. Okay, I'll meet you at the end. Yeah, I finished going around the rest of the way around the coaster, putting the 3 picots in each corner and then 1 all the way across each side. So I'm back to the last corner. I've already done 1 from the beginning, so I'm going to add 2 more picots. and then join in the beginning single crochet and fasten off. So that shows you how to do the interlocking fillet mesh technique with the added diagonals.